Today I'm walking on Almanar Drive in Green Bay, California, and I want to talk about some interesting things that are going on in the housing market. Because over the past couple of years, I have made a few videos talking about how every single time we reached a record amount of home buyers backing out of transactions. And we just seem to keep smashing those records year after year. And I think this is like kind of the last straw that sort of solidifies that we are now in an official buyer's market in the United States. And traditionally speaking, prior to now, a buyer's market was more defined by how much inventory was on the US housing market. But now it seems like a buyer's market should be defined by how buyers are actually acting and what's happening with home prices. Because even without having a full 6-month supply of inventory on the US housing market, home prices are still going down in about half of the country right now. And sellers also outnumber buyers by about 500,000 people, guys. That is kind of insane, which means that sellers have lost most of their leverage that they have had over the past 5 years. Not everywhere, but a lot of places that is now true. And at the same time, sellers are failing to adapt to this new era of selling a home. They're failing to adapt to home buyers' concerns. They're failing to adapt to new pricing that makes sense and what's in line with reality. And it shows by the amount of purchase agreements that have been canceled. As of August, 56,000 U.S. purchase agreements were canceled, which represents 15.1% of homes that went under contract. That's the highest share for August deals falling through going back to 2017. And that's when they started keeping track. And basically what's happening is there's a disconnect between buyers and sellers, and they're just not on the same page. And that's why these deals are falling apart at record numbers. In a survey of Redfin's real estate agents, 70% of them said that inspection or repair issues were the cause of canceled contracts by far as the top reason. And that was followed by almost 28% who said that the buyer financing fell through, which suggests that 30% of folks right now are having a hard time qualifying for a mortgage in today's environment. 21% also cited not being able to sell their current home as the main reason for canceling the contract. And 15% said there was a change in the buyer's financial situation. And 13% said the buyer had found another house that they preferred instead. And some of the other reasons were concerns about the current economy. And actually 11% of the time, the seller's the one who backed out. Also, low appraisals have been an issue. There's also been insurance issues as well as high mortgage rates being at the bottom of the list. But it's really not high mortgage rates that's the problem. It is the price of the house. And ultimately, when somebody sees what their payment's going to be for the house, they can get some sticker shock because they can't believe their monthly payment's going to be that high. And a small percentage of people blame mortgage rates, but mortgage rates could be 10% or 15%, and it wouldn't matter if the median home price was $100,000, you know? Now, it's not really a surprise that Florida and Texas had the highest cancellation rates across the country because the supply of new listings in these states have been absolutely crazy. And meanwhile, sellers still think that their homes will command the high asking prices that happened back in 2020 and 2021. In 2022, like that was forever ago. So many sellers are having a hard time adjusting to this new reality. The fact that it's no longer a seller's market, the fact that most people are not paying over asking price anymore, and homes are not getting multiple offers in many cases anymore either. This recent Redfin report also pointed out that the lower price homes are in the greatest demand, which is not really a big shocker, but also those lower price homes also have the highest amount of issues that come up during inspections, which makes it more likely that the buyer's going to cancel the contract. Because a lot of times these listings just look too good to be true, guys. You see a house that's in your budget, looks great, neighborhood's fantastic, whatever, and then you go look at it and it's a pile of garbage, you know? Everything needs to be renovated, essentially. The plumbing and electric hasn't been updated, and it's basically a money pit. Not to mention people have to fight higher insurance premiums. Here in California, they even have an insurance contingency on their for sale contracts to make sure that you are okay with the amount of insurance that you're going to be paying on that new home as one of your outs for the contract, because insurance is such an issue here, just like it is in Florida. In fact, pending home sales actually fell in September for the first time in about 3 months, even as mortgage rates continue to drop. And I just remember, I don't know how many hundreds of times I read in different stories that, oh, as soon as mortgage rates drop, we're going to see everybody come rushing back into the market. And in fact, it has been the opposite. 2025 is slated to be the worst home sale year on record since 1995, once again topping the record from 2023 and 2024. A Fannie Mae survey that came out earlier this month also showed that 70% of Americans believe the economy is headed in the wrong direction, and 73% think it's a bad time to buy a house. And I pride myself in being directly responsible for part of that sentiment, guys. I am happy to know that my channel has probably influenced hundreds of thousands of people out there to think this way, because it's the right way of thinking. It's the realistic way of thinking. It's not a coincidence that 73% of people think the economy is heading in the wrong direction. People are feeling it in their wallets. They're seeing it in their monthly payments for everything spiking, all while not seeing their income go up anywhere close to the amount necessary to keep up with any of it. And to give you the idea of the kind of thing that's happening out there right now, here's a little quick real estate story. One agent says that they worked with a seller who received 78 repair requests from a buyer following the inspection, and that was after the seller had already agreed to lower their asking price by $25,000 because the house needed some improvements. The buyer came back and said they would handle the cost of repairs, but only if the seller was willing to lower the price by another $100,000. The deal didn't work out. And I see that a lot here, guys. Like, I go to a lot of open houses when I'm here in California. There seems to be so many of them all the time. And you can tell certain places, man, like they just need a ton of work, especially some of these older properties here that haven't been touched or noticeably updated in at least 30 or even 50 years sometimes. And then those sellers think that they can command top dollar in the market. Like, who are they kidding? I don't blame this buyer at all for asking for an additional $100,000 in repair costs, because it costs a ton of money to make these repair costs. And even besides the repair costs themselves, the amount of time and effort and energy it drains from you is exhausting, guys. Meeting with repair people, getting estimates for everything, dealing with contractors not showing up on time or deadlines being delayed, living in shambles once you actually own the house and don't have anywhere else to go, and you're living through a construction nightmare. Like, who wants to go through that? I know I don't. And then the sellers don't want to budge and don't want to give people extra money off the sales price to accommodate for not only the extra cost, but the massive inconvenience of living there during the time. When you hear about stuff like this, it's basically a guarantee that this housing market is going to remain broken for years to come. Until prices come down back to earth, it's going to remain like this at least for probably 2 or 3 more years, I would imagine, before enough sellers realize that if I want to sell, this is the right price, and others are going to be in a position where they have to sell because they can't afford the house anymore with the ever-increasing cost of living. And a perfect example of that here is what's going on in Austin, Texas. One of my viewers, Robert, sent me this story because, as you know, local elections are coming up soon. November 4th is election day across the country, and everybody's having different local elections. And in Austin, Texas, they are proposing to increase their property taxes by 20% over there. That's right, 20%, guys, in just 1 year of an increase, okay? And the reason why that's crazy is not only the scale of the increase, but also the fact that Austin, Texas has some of the highest city taxes per person in the nation. Take a look at this chart here that shows you Austin, Texas taxes per person versus other cities, and you can see it's already at the top of the list, topping cities like Dallas, Denver, even Los Angeles, a high tax area in a high tax state. In Los Angeles, people pay about $3,100 a year in personal taxes. In Austin, people are paying almost $6,000 a year, basically double people in LA. And then if this new proposition goes through, people are going to be going from paying $6,000 a year to about $7,600 per year just to live in Austin, Texas. They say that the typical Austin, Texas homeowner would only pay about $420 more per year, but you know, that's typical. What about the realistic number? Wow, check out this house. These guys went all out with some of these Halloween decorations. Pretty cool. Pretty sure I passed this house and showed it last year. Very neat. The thing is, Austin is already one of those towns where it's unaffordable, even though home prices have dropped over 20% from their peak values in 2022. And even with that drop, home prices are still unaffordable, and yet they want to milk people for an extra 20% over there. The mayor of Austin, Texas, Kirk Watson, originally proposed only half the current increase, but that was overruled. And only one city council member in Austin, Texas voted no on this property tax increase from going on the ballot. Everybody else said, yeah, bring it on. And of course, local cities, local governments, that's all they ever want, man. They always just want more money to just blow and expect everybody to pay for it somehow. And a lot of the critics of this also argued that Austin, Texas became dependent on the federal COVID funds, and they have failed to reduce their spending ever since those funds have expired. This is becoming a very common phenomenon throughout many different facets of the economy. You see it happening with the electric car sales. Boom, taking a hit. People don't get the subsidy anymore. You see what's happening with health insurance premiums. You guys saw my video on this. Health insurance premiums are skyrocketing now that the COVID era subsidies are ending. It's like basically everything now depends on some sort of government help or stimulus or subsidy just to be able to function properly. What does that tell you about the health of our economy? And what does that tell you about what they're going to do in the wake of our national debt being higher than ever and the debt payments being the number one line item in our budget? It tells you that they're going to continue inflating that bubble to the point where the dollar is going to be worthless. And that's why you continue to see week after week, gold prices hit record highs. And I hope you have bought some, because if you didn't, you are being left behind. Owning gold is no longer a speculation, guys. It is a necessity if you want to preserve your wealth. That's just a fact. And they want to increase people's property taxes 20%, yet look at some of these examples of wasteful spending they have in the city of Austin. They want to spend $10 million for art in the airport. Are you kidding me? $10 million for art? They want to spend $1.1 million on a new city logo. They refuse to audit major departments like the water department or the energy department and the homeless program since 2019. I mean, this sounds like ultimate corruption if you ask me. I hope the people in Austin, Texas are smart enough to vote this down, because I never understood why people vote against their own interests. It always baffles me when stuff like this gets passed, but they also use tricky words and misleading tactics to get people to misunderstand what these ballot measures are really about and kind of trick people into voting for these things, and they only realize afterwards that it was a giant mistake. Now, Zillow came out recently and said that it would take an unrealistic mortgage rate drop in order to restore housing market affordability. And once again, you can see companies like Zillow, basically everybody in the news, is focused on the wrong thing. They're focused on mortgage rates. This recent Zillow analysis suggests that it would take a drop of more than 1 percentage point down to 4.43% for the median income U.S. home buyer to comfortably afford the median price U.S. home. And that assumes a 20% down payment, which most people don't do, by the way, which means that that's an unrealistic mortgage rate still for most people. And it's kind of funny to even hear this from Zillow, because just a month or two ago, they came out with a report saying that even if mortgage rates dropped 0%, most people still wouldn't be able to afford a home. Now it's 4.43%. They still stand by that statement, because they say in several high-cost coastal areas, probably like where I'm at right now, not even a 0% mortgage rate would make the median home price affordable for a household earning the local median income. This includes places like New York, Los Angeles, Miami, San Francisco, San Diego, and San Jose, where taxes, insurance, and maintenance on a median price home alone can often consume more than 10% of a median household's annual income. And that's why you continue to see the Midwest be such a stronghold for real estate, even in the wake of everything I talk about on this channel, because right now, mortgage rates are already low enough for the median income buyer to afford many homes in these Midwestern markets. And that's why you still see very low inventory. You still see homes flying off the shelf with multiple offers in a lot of cases, because people can still afford those houses. And let's face it, a lot of people who can no longer afford areas like this move to the Midwest and help pump up the prices over there, guys. And I'm afraid that the Midwest could turn into the next Florida or Texas, where prices even become unaffordable there for the locals, because so many are fleeing where they live now in favor of more affordable places to live. So the thing is, are we likely to see a 4.5% mortgage rate anytime soon? Absolutely not. We're not even close to the high fives, let alone the mid fours. It's just not going to happen. And that's why this is completely unrealistic, and housing is going to remain unaffordable. And since mortgage rates are not going to come down to an affordable rate, then the only other option is prices coming down to a point where buyers can afford it at the current mortgage rates. There is no other way. And you know, guys, there is just a lot of bad advice out there in general. Like, I saw this story today about why you should use a HELOC to pay down your credit card debt. I mean, just the headline of that story makes me sick to my stomach, because people read that and they fall for it. And they look at, hey man, I got like 20 grand in credit card debt, but on the other hand, I have $150,000 in available equity to borrow on my house. Maybe this is a good idea. And they read stuff like this and then they do it. And then they attach their house to their debt problems and make it so that if they cannot pay, then they end up losing the house. How fun is that? Here's some of the reasons they give of why you should do this. Interest rates are 3 times lower on HELOCs than they are on credit cards. The average HELOC rate is 7.84%, and the average credit card rate is around 22%. So a HELOC is much cheaper, and therefore you're going to pay less interest on that same amount of debt. And so because you're going to pay less money back by doing this, they say that's why it's a good idea. Now, in theory, just by looking at your cost basis of the debt, it is a good idea. But the part that they fail to mention here is that you are attaching your debt to your home now. And if you can't pay it, they're going to foreclose on you. They're going to take your house. The second reason they give of why you should do this is because the rate cuts that the Fed is going to be doing is not going to have an equal impact on both products. They claim that credit card rates are still at near record highs, but HELOC rates have dropped about 2 full percentage points since the first rate cut that we had back in September of 2024. And even though that might be true as well, it is still not a great reason to attach your debt to losing your house, guys. If you don't pay your credit card bills, the worst that's going to happen is your credit score is going to tank, and they're going to send you to collections, and you might get some annoying phone calls, and it might be hard to get other types of loans. But you're not going to have to worry about having a place to live. But if you attach that debt to your house and then something happens and you cannot pay, well, now they can take your house. And in some states, along with the house goes all of the equity you have built up in the house as well, which I know is criminal, but it happens more often than you might think. And the last reason they give of why this is a good idea is you'll have the flexibility to adjust your payoff approach. With a home equity line of credit, you only have to pay for the amount you utilize and not the full line of credit that you've been approved for. And even then, the full payment won't be mandated for multiple years, as many lenders will expect interest-only payments to be made on the HELOC during the initial draw period. This is another scam that they got going on with this. You know, it makes it look very cheap to borrow this equity out of your home, and it makes you delay your full debt responsibility that you have to pay, because you're only paying the interest up front. You pay back the principal years later on. Maybe years later once you've bought the new car. Maybe years later once you're paying for your kids to go to college, and now all of a sudden you have even more to pay for. That's the kind of trick that they don't tell you about. It's kind of like people that got the mortgage rate buy downs from home builders over the past few years, and now they're seeing their payments go up to the full amount that they would have had to pay if they never got that mortgage rate buy down. And many people can no longer afford their house payment because of it, even though they were able to qualify for that loan in the beginning. lifestyle inflation creeps in and people spend more money. When you have more money to spend, in general, people will just spend more. And once the full payment is due, suddenly the budget is no longer there to make those payments. And that's the same thing that happens to a lot of HELOC borrowers. In fact, I just saw a property in Tiburon that's in foreclosure, and just by the condition of the property, you can tell it's in original condition. Probably a very old couple lives there, and their property tax bill is only $1,900 a year. Clearly, they're not losing their house due to property taxes, thanks to Prop 13 here in California. Most likely, they are losing their house due to borrowing money against it, and they cannot afford to pay that money back. And so now, probably somebody in their 80s is losing their house to foreclosure, guys. But you see stories like this constantly because in this article, they have many links promoting ways that you can sign up for these home equity line of credit products, and they get a commission if you sign up for it. And in case you haven't noticed, I never promote stuff like this on my channel, guys, because I don't believe people should be signing up for things like this. Can they be a valuable tool under the right circumstances? Sure. Is it something that most people should do? Absolutely not. And because I know, based on all the data we go over on this channel, that consumer spending habits are not great, I don't think it's a good thing to promote. So let me know what you guys think about all this. Let me know if you're interested in buying a house anytime soon. In case you are, don't forget I have a link for that down in the description below. You can use one of my agents 100% for free. If you do, it not only helps you, but it helps the channel, and I appreciate it. So if you guys enjoyed this video, make sure you subscribe. And if you don't want to wait for my next video to come out, check out this one on the screen right over here, and I'll see you in the next one.